and service. When someone asks you, what is Rotary all about? Rotary is all about providing service. It's all about promoting integrity, and it's all about advancing world understanding, peace, and goodwill. If someone asks you, that's how you're going to respond. Let us all take out our phones and or cameras or whatever it is that you use. Take a selfie, take a picture of the group. Let people know where you are. Post it, get the word out. You're part of the best Rotary Club in District 5830. Let's take a moment to do that. Be sure to put your phone on silent, put it on airplane mode or whatever. But let us prepare now as we're getting ready to say the Pledge of Allegiance and sing the national anthem, and let us stand. And here is Larry to lead us in that activity.
Thank you. Let's join together in the pledge, and then we'll sing the national anthem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Let us pray. Father, for this noonday meal, we would speak the praise we feel. Hope and strength we have in thee. Help us, Lord, to faithful be. And let all the people say, Amen. You may be seated. For our guest today, David, you have a guest. Would you introduce your guest?
I'd like to introduce my beloved for many, many, many years and many more years to come. This is Lynn Jones. Give her a welcome, please.
Great to have you there. LaRue, you have a guest. Oh, okay.
Longtime friend of LaRue's, and she's back in Tyler. She and her husband. So Liz, we're glad to have you.
Holly, you have a guest.
Yes, I do. This is Becky Cunha. She is the executive director for the Silent here in Tyler. I've known her from her time through the Cherokee County and Anderson County Crisis Center, and she was the executive director there. She wants to transfer her membership from from Palestine, because Tom's coming from Jacksonville. So I'm trying to keep them all straight here. So we have her application, and so we are looking forward to having her join us.
Great. Great to have you today. Are there any other guests? Yes, please.
I am delighted to introduce all the way from Australia my son.
All right.
Peter has just concluded last year 30 years in the Australian Army Aviation and is now active in the reserve. His current employment is in rescue and emergency corps in Sydney. And in all the years I've been in Rotary, this is the first time that I've ever had the opportunity to invite you for a Rotary meeting, which just confirms what we all know, that good things happen in Texas, especially at the Rotary Club of
All right, wonderful. Great to have you with us. Are there any other guests or Rotarians here? Yes. Chris.
I guess this is Lena Belcona. Y'all have met. She's our friend from Ukraine. We've been at TJC. Research secretary. This is Tom Trimble. Woo! He is a Rotarian from Jacksonville. He's working standing more to Tyler now, so a lot of y'all know him. I've got to know Tom because he worked with my dad for a long time, and now he's in my dad's position since my dad retired. Tom's a great guy. Paul Harris, former president of Jacksonville, so we're happy to have him.
All right, wonderful. Vicki, you want to introduce your guest?
I would like to introduce Ben Reeder, who is a freshman piano major.
Wonderful.
Showed up in August from Alberta, Canada.
Wow.
He is a blessing for the department, and I hope you'll hear much more.
And while the two of you are up, the piano playing today was phenomenal. Forehand keyboard. You have lots of majesty in that in your presentation. Yes, Bill, you've got a wonderful guest to introduce.
You guys all know her. It's my wife. Okay?
Miss America.
That's right, Miss America. She's very humble about all that. She came to me last night, fell on her knees, begged me, Bill, please, please, take me to Rotary tomorrow. So here she is.
Very much. Bill, I just have one question of that. Is that the truth? All right. We'll ask you again at the end of the meeting. Any other guests? LaRue, you were out and we didn't know, and Gareth did it for us. Okay, I assume then we'll move on with our agenda. Our greeters for the day were Kimberly Smotherman and Jim Blair III. Thank you both very much for your help in that. And a lot of you may not know it, but tomorrow is Kimberly's birthday. So happy birthday a day early to you there. With respect to Rotary business, our monthly board meeting is going to be tomorrow, December the 16th, at the Ultra Federal Credit Union at the loop of 323 and Highway 155. Bring your own lunch at 11:30, and the meeting gets away at noon. And we really make a valiant effort to try to get out by or before 1 o'clock. We really keep the pace going. And anybody's welcome. It doesn't have to be just board members. The other day, it must have been fairly early in the morning, I woke up in my window. There had been some kind of a boom of some kind in the area of town where I lived, and my windows rattled. And I'd never heard that before, at least in my home that I live in. And I wondered what that was. And then, of course, I didn't hear any more noise after that. And the first thing I thought of was, gosh, what if I lived in Ukraine and you're in a neighborhood and you heard a boom and your windows rattled, and you think that might have been a bomb that hit someplace 4 or 5 blocks away, and living with that kind of uncertainty. And I got to thinking about the blessings that I have, that I live in a town and a country where I don't have to worry about bombs coming over. But that's not true with what happens with respect to Ukraine. We have a project going on with Ukraine. We have raised 5,000, then we had 5,000 more to raise. We have raised to date $3,697, which means that hopefully before December 22nd, we can finish that off with only $1,300 or so left. I know there's a few of you in this group would love to give to Ukraine firsthand.
I'll give 1,300.
There you go, 13, unbelievable. Thank you very, very much. You are Tom Perkins, aren't you? Is that right? That's what I thought, okay. Thank you very much.
Be sure to get the name wrong.
Right. Thank you, we really do appreciate that, more than I can understand. Holiday, let me make sure, just a second, I gotta be real cagey on this one. We have a holiday donation for Lupita, who I don't think is in the room right now. And it's out there on a basket. If you would like to contribute to that, we urge you to do so. She works very, very hard for us all 52 weeks of the year, and she's worth whatever it is you would like to donate. So I wanted to lift that to your attention. Hopefully she's not in the room, and I'll keep that. Okay. Holly needs your November hours. You can get them back to her November hours on volunteering. We keep track of that, whether it's volunteering here through Rotary organization you belong to, whether it's Boy Scouts or whatever. She needs that. Please email them to her. At this point in time, I would like to ask Mike Metke to stand up. Oh, wow. Mike Metke is, I believe, from Wisconsin. Is that correct? Yeah, Mike Metke's from Wisconsin. He was the former president of Tyler Junior College, but I had heard that earlier in his life he had been a cop. And when I found that out, I thought, gosh, there's still hope for Bill Croon. But you have been, since you've joined our Rotary, you've been engaged, you've invited guests, you've participated with us. You did an exemplary job when you were at TJC in the expansion of that campus and the degree programs that came online. It's just incredible. We're more than blessed that you're part of us. I thank you that you're part of the Rotary Club of Tyler. Thank you very much, Dr. Now, normally Trudy would be here and I would harass her just a little bit, but she couldn't make it today. And our program is going to be from Paul Gleiser. And she was going to say, well, you know, he's just one of us. We all know him. And there's a truth to that. But we're very fortunate to have someone like Paul Gleiser. He's, you know, knows the national media in a way that none of us really do. And you get to thinking about just here in the Tyler clubs. We don't have anybody from the newspapers here. We don't have anybody from the television stations here. But we have someone who has the depth and experience and knowledge of Paul Gleiser. One of the things I think that shows really his perspicacity is his very early on, once that Rush Limbaugh died in the show, that slot came open, he had the intelligence to figure out we need to get onto the program early, like Jimmy Fallon. And Fox Over the Nation. That has been one of the best calls you could have possibly made. And it's also given national prominence to KTBB because several times Paul has filled in for the national program. That's astounding to have a Tyler, can't say homeboy, Highland Park's really, I guess, your home, but he has such
University Park.
University accords you more elegance than what you're, yeah, I get it. Your SMU, wherever it is. Anyway, he has such a commitment to Tyler and Smith County that he's just with us all the time. And I deeply appreciate his insight. I love hearing his comments, his political comments that a lot of folks won't dare to do, but Paul will. He sticks his neck out, and he's really there for all of us in the Tyler community. So I don't know what more words I can say, but Paul, you're on.
Thank you. I'm going to use this one. So to show you the level of dedication to you guys, Jimmy Fallon called me last night about 10:30 and said he was leaving the Fox Christmas party and said this, that, and the other for you, but can you do the show tomorrow, meaning today? And I'm supposed to be on the radio, but I said, no, I got Rotary, the Rotary Club of Tyler. And no.
When I heard that guy from Philadelphia on today, I said, I'll bet Paul was asked first.
Oh, well, yeah, Rich Seoli, he's a friend of mine, but Rich is doing the show today. I'm doing it tomorrow because Jimmy's off today and tomorrow. Back to the matter at hand. 50 years ago, right now, this very minute, the Apollo 17 command module containing the Apollo 17 crew under the command of Gene Cernan was in trans-Earth coast, which is to say it was on its way back to Earth for a December 17th splashdown in the Pacific Ocean, bringing to an end the Apollo manned lunar program. It was the Apollo 18, Apollo 19, and Apollo 20 were all canceled. So this marked the end of man's first attempt to establish a human presence on the moon. And so that's the reason I asked to be on the program today. I interviewed Gene Cernan. What I went to interview Gene Cernan about was not this. I was working on when the shuttle program was terminated by the Obama administration and left America where it started with no way to boost a human into space. I did a 5-part series on KTBB about that, and as it happened, Gene Cernan and Neil Armstrong both testified, Neil Armstrong being the first man to walk on the moon, Gene Cernan being the last man to walk on the moon, testified before Congress, and their testimony was, we cannot afford as a nation to completely abandon our capacity to boost humans into space. And they were testifying before Congress, and I picked up on that, and I did this. And so I wanted to talk to Gene Cernan, and if you want to talk to a NASA astronaut, active or retired, you go through NASA's public affairs office, and I knew some people there. I called up, said, I get hold of Gene Cernan. Well, here's his contact information. Of course, it's totally up to him. So I fired off an email to the email address I was given, and that email was tended by a lovely woman by the name of Claire, whose job was to make people like me go away. Really, that's a big part of her job. And so I knew that going in. I knew she was going to try to make me go away. And as the whole debate about whether or not we were going to extend the shuttle program was going on, a little nugget in the news reminded me of Cernan's spacewalk during the Gemini program, which was the program that preceded Apollo, and how it became within a whisker of him being the first fatality in space. That spacewalk went very badly because they didn't know what they didn't know when that mission launched. And so I said, this is similar to Captain Cernan's experience on Gemini 9. She showed that to him. He reached back out and said, okay, I passed the test. This guy knows something about what he's talking about. So he agreed to be interviewed. And the interview took place. He's a pilot. I'm a pilot. He was having his airplane worked on in Longview at Grant County Airport. So I'll meet you there. And Claire said, Captain Cernan can give you an hour. I said, okay, an hour it is. I'll get my business done in an hour. That's very generous. Thank you very much. So that's how it all got set up. More on how we actually wound up with what we have here in just a minute, but a little bit of background. Apollo 17 launched from Cape Canaveral, Launch Complex 39A on December 7th, 1972. It splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on the 19th. It was the last Apollo lunar landing mission. It was the longest Apollo mission. It was 12.5 days from launch to splashdown. It was the longest duration on the lunar surface. One of the things that fascinates me about Apollo 17, how many people gone on a 3-day business trip? You've been on a 3-day business trip? So you go, you check into the hotel, you go out, you do your business all day, you come back, you eat, you sleep, you go out and do it again, and you do that for 3 days, and you come home. They did it 250,000 miles away from Earth on the moon. They went and worked for 3 days, worked all day on the surface of the moon, working on Houston time. Houston, the control center's in Houston, so they did it during the day in Houston, work all day, go back to the hotel. The hotel was the lunar module. Close the door, take off their suit. You take off your suit when you're at the end of your business day, eat dinner, go to sleep. Did that for 3 days. That's astonishing that you think about that. The longest duration that Apollo 17 had the longest duration outside the spacecraft, 22 hours over 3 days. They were outside the spacecraft for roughly 7 hours a day, spread over 3 days. And they traveled the greatest distance from the landing site, 4.7 miles. They did that by virtue of having a thing called the lunar rover. Lunar rover would have gone a lot farther than 4.7 miles. 4.7 miles was the walk back limit. So if the lunar rover failed, 4.7 miles was the distance they could walk back and still have enough consumables to be safe and get back. Could have driven a lot farther than that. Gene Cernan. One of the things I learned, I've interviewed 4 Apollo astronauts. Buzz Aldrin, Pete Conrad, commander of Apollo 12, Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, Gene Cernan, and Frank Borman, commander of Apollo 8. One of the things I learned about the astronauts of that era, they are whip smart men. I mean, you've been in the presence of people where you realize this is just a couple of words out of their mouth. You realize you're dealing with a highly, highly, highly intelligent person. They were also highly competitive because there were only a certain number of missions, only a certain number of seats. Not everybody gets to fly, so they are giving maximum effort every day. And one of the casualties of the Apollo program was marriages. Apollo astronauts lost their marriages over the Apollo program. Him being one of them. He was born in Chicago, Illinois on March 1934. He died in Houston in January of 2017. Not that long after I interviewed him. He was a U.S. Navy captain. He flew fighter jets off of aircraft carriers. He was the co-pilot on Gemini 9, the second American to walk in space. It was a much more ambitious spacewalk than the 2 that had preceded it, one by the Soviets and one by Ed White on Gemini 4. And they found out there's a whole lot about working in zero gravity that they didn't know, and they didn't know that they didn't know. And it was this is not about Gemini 9, but he very nearly didn't live to be on Apollo 17. And he was the lunar module pilot on Apollo 10. That flew in May of 1969. It was a dress rehearsal for the first lunar landing on Apollo 11. It flew to 50,000 feet above the lunar surface, and then came back and rejoined with the command module. They couldn't land, but NASA was smart. They told them, you don't have enough fuel to get back. There was insufficient launch fuel to get back, so they gave them the incentive to not land. Because if they landed, they couldn't have gotten off the surface. And he was, of course, commander of Apollo 17, the final mission of the Apollo program. The shuttle program terminated by Congress, as I was telling you, that's the occasion of the interview. Cernan, Jim Lovell, and Neil Armstrong had all testified before Congress seeking, to keep the program going. I arranged to meet Cernan at the Gregg County Airport, and I was told I had an hour. And I said, okay, well, the topic is the state of the manned, the news, the 5-part series I'm working on is the state of the manned space program today. It's not about me getting all my space geek questions answered. You need to know that I began preparing for this interview in the 2nd grade. When John Glenn's mission to orbit the Earth launched, and Miss Holt arranged to have a TV brought into the room, and we followed that mission all day long. And I was utterly and totally captivated. And I became a real student and a real aficionado of the American Manned Space Program from that moment forward. So I was, about a million things I would talk to an astronaut about, but my deal was we're going to talk about the shuttle program. But I got my questions answered, and I said, Captain, I was told an hour, and we're done, and I appreciate your time. He said, no, we're good. We're good. What else you got? What else you got? Oh, boy. I said, shouldn't ask me that. So I was within 2 hours and 40 minutes. No way in the world we could do that here. So I'm just giving you some of the good parts, some of the stuff that would be interesting to a group of people like this. So this interview took place in a conference room at the fixed base operator at Gregg County Airport. And here's how it went.
Stuff that I want to know because I'm getting to talk to an astronaut.
Now you're being
Now I'm turning into a groupie. Okay?
Now you're the groupie.
Now I'm a groupie, but it's not going to be what was it like on the moon, I promise. But here are the things that I really want to know. How did you react to 1/6G in actuality versus the simulations?
Well, we really couldn't simulate 1/6G except for 20 to 25 seconds.
Really, yeah.
And we really didn't do any underwater training for the moon. And my response to 1/6G is extremely positive. It takes you 5 or 10 minutes to realize that your center of gravity, you're not held down to the ground as firmly as you are in Earth gravity. So when you start moving, you don't, to go from here across the parking lot, step by step. Your computer immediately recomputes and says, That's crazy. So you go in leaps and bounds. You saw us walking in the
Uh-huh.
You can skip, you can hop, you can, whatever you want. It's just, this computer immediately determines that's best and easiest and most efficient way to go from here to there. But what it doesn't tell you up front is that when you get ready to stop or turn, you better prepare yourself because your center of gravity is up here with that backpack and you're held down not as firmly as you are in earth gravity. And if you decide you're just going to turn a corner, you're going to end up going tail over tea kettle. And we did that occasionally. But you get accustomed to 1/6 gravity. And I'll tell you what, zero gravity is for the pits. I don't like it.
Really?
Oh, seems like you get around with these, but let me tell you, they talk, I don't know what the medical problems are. They order your heart powers down because it doesn't have to pump blood uphill anymore, and you have to keep doing exercises and bone decalcification or whatever all those medical things are. But if you got something in your hand and you want to lay it down for a minute, and unless you Velcro it, snap it, or it disappears, it's going to find its way somewhere else. You can't pour water in a glass. You can't have a cup of coffee. I can't tell you how important it is to have a cup of coffee. Everything got to be put in the bag. If you drink water out of a water gun or a bag because you get water dropped, I don't like it.
Okay.
1/6 gravity is Earth gravity times 10. It's wonderful. You can get around easier. Water stays in a cup. You can live and eat like a normal human being. You're held down. If you want to go someplace, you can drive a car. You and the rest of the world would bless me if I could just wave a line and make 1/6 gravity the median in which we work. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And on Mars, it's 1/3 gravity. It's probably going to be almost as good.
You watch the movies and they depict thruster firing. Can you hear it from inside the space?
Hear what?
Thruster firing. When you
Thuds.
it's a thud?
You can hear a thud, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you've always wanted to, yeah, you can hear a thud. You can definitely, particularly in a lamp. See, the lamp is not quite made out of tissue paper, but it's, it doesn't have to go through the aerodynamics of leaving the earth, and all we got to do is protect ourselves from thermodynamics.
Right.
And the pressurized inside the spacecraft once we get in and take our suits off. But it's, the command module is like a battleship.
Right.
The lunar module is like a piece of mylar practically. And, when you get in a spacecraft and pressurize the spacecraft, the hatch, I don't know if you've seen a hatch on a command module. It's exotically designed thick hatch. The lamp is just a little tin door.
Right.
And when you close it, no lock, you just a little latch and you pressurize it, goes boop, like, you ever been on the inside of an oil can?
Sure.
Oh, you haven't, but just imagine yourself being there. That's the limb.
Yeah.
That's the limb. But therefore, when you hit a thruster, you get that bang.
All right. I embarrassed myself in the simulator at Orion down in Houston. I'm a pilot, I fly.
It's great to talk to you because, you've done a lot of homework and had a lot of experience. And
Thank you, because I appreciate that. I'm gonna dock. They got a sim set up, and I'm gonna dock the thing. I'm a pilot, I've never flown in 0G, and I've never flown outside the air. Okay,
Mhm.
and I'm embarrassing myself. I docked. I docked. I got a hard dock, but it was not pretty. Okay?
that's all right.
But I see this footage of the limb, and I see it'll be in a roll, and then it just stops, just nulls instantly. How don't you do that? Because I couldn't null out the rates.
But you do that with data and autopilot.
Okay.
There's about 6 or 8 different modes in the autopilot. One is you can overcome it as soon as you leave go. You might have rate damping, attitude damping. You might have something. So don't give us all that credit.
Okay.
We had a little help from the autopilot. So you move at a certain rate and you leave go, it'll maintain that rate. Or you want to go to this certain attitude and line it up. And if you center the control handle, it'll lock on that attitude. It stops.
Okay.
Now, can you do that manually? And did we have to do it? Did we practice it manually? Yeah, but we probably weren't much better than you were.
Okay. That makes
But we could do it.
Could you have handled, when Conrad's launched, and they lost the platform, they lost everything. As I understand it, it was a Sperry flight director. Could you have hand flown a Saturn to orbit?
Yes.
You could have?
Oh, I'll tell you what, I dared that thing to fail. I've been, as commander of Apollo 17, I was in that launch, what they call the launch abort simulator.
Right.
I don't know how many hours I got in, and I failed everything on me. And Apollo 17 was at night.
Right.
First night long. And that gave me, there was a different perspective because you didn't have a horizon. All I had was stars.
Right.
But on a simpler basis, if the Saturn, the only automatic thing we really had was the Saturn, the booster guidance.
Uh-huh.
But we backed it up with a spacecraft computer who knew where it was and knew where it wanted to go. So it gave me information too. So I could always monitor where the Saturn was taking us versus where the spacecraft think we should have gone.
Okay.
And I had one switch, and I could have flipped the switch, and I'm flying 7.6 million pounds of thrust with my hand, and I promise you, we'll never know. But I didn't want it to happen, but I dared it to happen because I knew I could fly it into orbit. Once I flew it into orbit, we didn't need that guidance anymore.
Right.
I knew I could do it.
Titan ride.
Same thing was on the abort. If we had the board up there, it had nothing to look at. Yeah, a lot of things you had to do, and I had those star patterns were so visible in my mind. And when they came into view, I said, you know, if it shuts down or if I have a problem now, that's your lifeblood up there.
Right. Titan ride versus a Saturn ride. I watched the launches. It looks like a Titan's a sports car, and the Saturn is a.
Yeah, as I remember, the Titan, of course, it's an intercontinental ballistic missile.
Right.
Lifted off, I think we had a Titan, as I remember, certainly you remember, 420,000 pounds of thrust, and the payload was, I don't know, but the thrust to weight ratio was a lot more than 1. Saturn V, 7.6 plus million pounds of thrust, but the thrust to weight ratio was barely over 1, which meant people think you lift off and your face peels back. You barely, takes you 14 seconds to clear the tower.
Right.
I mean, and that's an eternity for 2 reasons. Number one, you don't want the thing to slide and hit the tower. And number two, if you lose one of those 5 Saturn V engines before that 15 seconds is over, you come back down. If you lose it after that, you've burned out enough fuel where those 4 engines can you and get you into orbit. Maybe not as efficiently, but you can get in orbit and complete your mission. And so you just have noise and you're shaking. The Saturn V lit off, I think, close to 9 seconds before.
8.6 seconds.
Before we lifted off, the engines would ignite. And you'd sit there and you could feel, people say, was it loud? There's a very close tie between what you feel and what you hear. And the answer is, I don't know whether I heard it or felt it, but it was noisy. And then, you know, and then when you lift off, you can feel the thud.
Right.
But you're barely, I mean, there's no G-forces.
Right.
You're barely moving more than one G.
Right.
Until you start burning out a lot of that fuel, and at 2.5 seconds or so, the first stage burns out. And it shuts down. And at that point in time, you're at about 4 Gs. I mean, you're really carrying the mail. And when it shuts down, it's boom, 0 G, 1, you know, bang. It's like John Young used to call it the great train wreck.
Okay.
I've never been in a great train wreck, but I've been in 2 Saturn V stations. And then relatively quiet, smooth. Then you start out maybe a little bit more than 1 G again. And the reason for that is weight requirements were so strict. In the Saturn V, you know, we had to close the margins as much as we could to still make them safe.
Right.
But to get as much out of the booster because we had so much payload on top.
Right.
And so that's why the thrust to weight ratios were very small. And it was when you burn down that fuel at the end of each stage, then you start moving. The third stage of the Saturn V, I don't even think we were at 1 G. And I mean, slowly grinding away.
As opposed to the Titan, where
Oh yeah, the Titan.
fuel your
When
face
the
down.
Titan staged, the staging was not as dramatic, but I remember both of those boosters. When you shut down the first stage, the fireball keeps going.
Right.
And a Titan burned a lot cleaner because of the propellants it had. but particularly on Saturn V, the fireball kept going. Right? And you shut down and didn't stop in space, but effectively your acceleration stopped. And the fireball kept going, and it'd pass you up, and then you'd fly through it. Right? But the Titan got us into orbit in, I don't know, a lot quicker than the Saturn V did. Right. And it was only 2 stages. Right. But it was a good ride. It was a good ride. That was my first flight. They could have tied me to the backside of it.
Did you shoot that?
Yeah. Well, one of us did. That came from Apollo 17.
Well, I know it did. I mean,
they
5
tell
hours
me,
after
I
launch.
can't tell you whether I shot it or one of my, Jack Schmidt or Ron Evans shot it.
And actually,
we all took pictures.
Actually, you shot it like that. It was
yeah. I see that picture hanging upside down in a lot of places. They tell me, I read something not long ago, that of all the pictures and all the pictures on the lunar surface, right? And I got some favorites, that this is the most sought after picture NASA has ever produced.
No doubt. And my question to you, it segues into a question. You're shooting Hasselblads with, in the case of on the surface, no viewfinder, no exposure meter, and
we had a little pop-up ring finder, as I remember, but that's it.
How are you setting exposure and focus?
Manually.
But based on, well, I'm a photographer.
Well, okay.
I'm a photographer.
Okay,
so.
We thought about it. We knew. We had a lot of briefings. We had a lot of, we played with the cameras a lot, and they'd say, well, we think the albedo's going to be so much and the sunlight's going to be so much, but we're not sure. So we want you to take, here's what we think the optimum is, particularly on the surface. But we want you to take pictures on both sides.
So
change the f-stop, bracket the f-stop, even bracketed the timing. And the same thing here. We would take, I don't know how many shots, and we pass that camera around in a command module, and I don't know who took it, but we bracket as a photographer. We had to train as geologists. Right. We had to train as scientists in terms of all the experiments we ran on the way to the moon and on the way back, and the ones we put on the moon. We had to be photographers. We weren't experts in any of those things except the flying part, right. But we had to be observers on the moon. We had to be capable of understanding the camera. We had to be capable of changing lenses. We had to be capable of not repairing the camera, but making it work if it didn't.
Right. And the thing that struck me about I have 3 passions in life. I'm a broadcaster, I'm a pilot, I'm a photographer. Okay. This thing that strikes me about much of the photography, a lot of it was documentary. You're just documenting what you're doing, but some of it is breathtakingly artful.
You never know what you're going to get.
The picture that you shot of the flag and the Earth.
That's the one I want to talk about. I took the Jack Schmidt. I was just pointing this piece of hardware at him, and I must have taken at least half dozen pictures, and one of them came out, maybe more than one. I don't know. That's got to be my favorite picture, only because, number one, I thought of it was a unique picture, and it couldn't have been taken on any other flight because the moon, the Earth never would have been that low on the horizon, right. Only on Apollo 17.
Right.
And if we get this picture, I never knew but it came out great. And Jack took a similar one of me, but he didn't get down that low, but he did get the Earth and the flag and my torso.
Right.
And it tells me because of red stripes.
Right.
So that worked. The biggest problem we had on the surface of the moon was it was like real fine graphite. Graphite is a lubricating material. This was just the opposite, creating friction, stuck to everything, stuck to all our electronic equipment on the lunar rover had to be radiation cool. It would cool to deep space. It covered with dust, it wouldn't work. We had to keep it clean. We had to keep our camera lenses clean with a little brush. And you can see some of the pictures of us. We look like coal miners. And there's a picture of me in a lunar module with my helmet off, and I truly do look like a coal miner. It stuck to everything. When we were in the lunar module, we could take our gloves off, and we took some rocks in and started playing with rock. The lunar dust, literally, I just didn't have dirty fingernails. It went all the way down to the bottom of my nail, and all my fingers were just somewhere between my nail and my skin were nothing but solid lunar dust. It took 6-8 weeks or whatever it took for that lunar dust to grow out with my nails. It produced friction. And if you had any open bearings, everything was sealed on a lunar rover, but anything that would be open, bearings of any kind. It was the one thing that gave us the most trouble and will continue to give people trouble. Very, very fine, finer than beach sand.
Following TLI, how quickly did the Earth recede out the window?
You know, let me back up so that you understand. When you're in Earth orbit,
Right.
travel 18,000 miles an hour, travel around the world once every hour and a half. You're flying for the most magnificent, beautiful sunrises and sunsets you've ever seen. Two of them one of each every revolution. 16 sunrises and sunsets every 24 hours. You've traveled you're over 300 miles above the surface. You're flying over a river, a coastline, an ocean, you might even get a glimpse of your own hometown. But when you leave Earth orbit, when you fire the third stage of that rocket and you start accelerating at 25,000 miles and head on out somewhere, it's a different space program. It's a different space program technologically. It's a different space program philosophically, and it's a different space program spiritually. You know, when you can put the palm of your hand up and cover up the world and block out everything you know and understand, your life, your family, your past, your future, you got to reconcile that. That's when I say philosophically it becomes a new space program. The other thing is that you see happening is that every 12 hours, you're looking at the other side of the world. North America and South America sort of creep around a corner over a period of hours, right? Okay. And then all of a sudden, Asia, Europe, and the entire continent of Africa come into view, and North and South America on the other side of the world, and there's no strings holding it up. You know, why doesn't this thing move aimlessly and tumble through space? No strings holding up, no fulcrum that globe on your desk turns on, and yet it moves with logic and purpose through the blackest black that you can conceive in your mind. I happen to you call it infinity, and we can't even define what infinity is. I call it the endlessness of space and the endlessness of time. And you move the earth that you're privileged to see at that moment, moves through so perfectly, and it's too beautiful. This is when I used the word spiritual earlier. Too beautiful to have happened by accident. I don't care about what name you call your God, how you dress him, or how you decide to worship him. I can promise you there is a creator of this universe, at least a small part of the universe I was privileged to see. Too beautiful to have happened by accident. I had a chance to challenge those feelings on my second trip to the moon. And I came back even reinforced my feelings a second time. And no one can ever convince me otherwise. I've been there, I've seen it, I know.
End it there. It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Let me give you the bad news. We didn't end it there. We went another hour. No, it just kept going. And I finally said to him, I said, look, Claire told me an hour. And I said, if you don't get up and walk out the door or shoot me, you're going to be here the rest of the day. And this was the camera that we used used tape, actual physical tape, and we loaded up the third cassette and recorded some more stuff. So there's a lot of material. A whole lot got left on the cutting room floor because this is a 1 hour meeting. But I brought you the stuff that I did. I picked it. A lot of it is so geeky and so nerdy that it wouldn't. I don't think it would have the impact that I wanted it to have. So you got some of the best stuff out of that interview. And he was really great. So, and we were lamenting at the time, we spent a little bit of time talking about, I asked him the question, it's not in there. Did you think it would be this long before we had somebody on the moon again? Did you think we would go to the point that we just don't have, we can't launch Alan Shepard 150 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean in a 15-minute ballistic flight. We can't even do that we did in 1961. Did you think? He said, no, I didn't think it would go this long. But we're getting there. There's some hope on the horizon. Artemis 1 just splashed out just recently. Its hope is to return humans to the moon by 2024. The 2024 flight is supposed to be a lunar orbit flight only, a 4-man crew.
orbiting the moon, not landing. And then 2 years after that, when the landing craft is finished, the Orion 1 vehicle just passed its test, so it's man-rated. It can be flown. It just splashed down. They hope to return humans to the moon by 2024. It spent 25 days in space, including 6 days in lunar orbit, and by all reports, performed absolutely marvelously. The Orion spacecraft is a part of the constellation which the Obama administration canceled. Artemis is the program that the Trump administration launched, and it looks like it's going to happen. Looks like there's enough support in it, and unlike the Apollo program, which was a pure government program, buying hardware from private sector contractors, an awful lot of the support work on Artemis will be done by SpaceX and the private sector company. It's less of a pure government program than the original Apollo program. The Orion multipurpose crew vehicle borrows heavily from the Apollo program. You can see that there is a great deal of similarity. Why reinvent? Apollo worked. That whole system worked very, very well. And that is the program. And I thank you. We have a fair amount of time for questions if anybody has any. And Mr. Groom back there has one.
Yeah, I was just looking about Gene Cernan. One of his most famous quotes, I wonder if you were going to ask you this question. He says, Gene Cernan says, I've been asked about UFOs, and I've said publicly, I thought there were somebody else, some other civilization. I know a lot of astronauts have their opinions about that.
We did not get into that. I didn't go that direction with him. I was so busy geeking out from starting from the second grade going forward. He said a number of times, and I left it out because it would have been egotistical for me to put it in, but he was very, very nice. He's gracious. He said, these guys are subjected when they do interviews. One of the reasons they don't like to give interviews is because they mostly give dumb interviews by dumb interviewers who would. I talked to Frank Borman on the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 8 mission that orbited the moon on Christmas Eve, 1968. And he said, people from the network would say, now, what mission were you on? From the network, not from KTVB in Tyler, Texas, from the network. And so they don't like to give him, and he was very, very complimentary. He said, you've been preparing, you've obviously done your homework, you're very well prepared. I said, I've been preparing since the second grade. And we got along great, and we maintained contact, and we talked to him every now and then until not long before he died. He's a really, really great guy. Question?
I actually have two questions.
Okay.
One is a question and one is a comment.
Okay.
I want to say thank you so very much. That was a lot.
Well, you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Think how many young people today know jack shit.
Don't hold back.
Because this is part of our history, this is part of America's greatness, and I really think that's a shame.
Well, okay, this is a
Names, and I recognize those names.
This is a 3-hour talk show you just opened up. I mean, really, I could do 3 hours on it tomorrow, and I may allude to it tomorrow. But there's a couple of things points that you raised. First of all, in my opinion, anybody wants to disagree, I have not been disagreed with yet. The Apollo program is, in my opinion, the last U.S. government grand program that kept all its promises. The last one. John F. Kennedy stood before Congress a few days after Alan Shepard's flight. Alan Shepard launched off of Cape Canaveral, went 150 miles downrange in a 15-minute flight, landed in the Atlantic Ocean. We called it a man in space. It could barely be called that. Kennedy, a few days after that, says we're going to go to the moon. We had no idea how to go to the moon. None. And none of the infrastructure existed. There wasn't a rocket on Earth powerful enough to do it. There wasn't enough computational capacity in order to manage the navigation. There was nothing. It didn't exist. 8 years later, men were walking on the moon. And the country turned it was a $25 billion spend over 8 years. That's a major 300 billion, 400 billion in today's dollars. It's an enormous amount of money. The country wasn't, oh, hang on, Bill, the country wasn't, checkbook wasn't overdrawn the way it is now. And so it can be done, but it is the last government program that kept all its promises. One of the problems that the manned spaceflight has, and things like this have, and this is why this is a talk show, and maybe it's not appropriate here, but this was a pure merit-based system. You had to be the smartest guy or you didn't get hired. You had to be the smartest person and you didn't get hired. And yes, it was all guys. Not all, but 99% white men. And say what you want to about that, good or bad. That's how it went down. And they just got the best guys they could because they had a deadline. They said, we're going to do whatever we have to do to meet the deadline. And today, in a lot of places, the manned space program is said to have consumed resources that should have been used to alleviate the suffering of the poor and the yada, 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 yada. The lives of everybody. Who do you know that doesn't have a cell phone? Because you can trace your iPhone directly. I mean, there's a straight line between your iPhone and the Apollo manned space program. Straight line. And the technology that was developed for the lunar mission wound up in your pocket or in your purse and your phone, which you use all the time. I saw some of you during the program today. Yes, sir. Coming to you, Bill.
All the tooth-colored fillings we put in the mouth, tooth-colored fillings called composite.
Yeah.
Came from the space program.
There you go. Or we could be, that's another talk show too. The things that flow, desire to get to the moon, we use every day. You don't even think about. Yes, sir.
I'm a proud American. No, and I think it is worth pointing out that the first man to fly an airplane, the first man to orbit the earth, and the first man and the last man to walk on the surface of the moon, they were all Americans, and they all walked the earth in the same century.
Except the first man to orbit the earth was Yuri Gagarin.
Sorry, no, John Glenn.
No, John Glenn was the second. Yuri Gagarin, the first.
All right, so I got the rest of it right.
Rest of it right. But that sets up what propelled the lunar program. It wasn't about science. It was about national pride, and it was about Cold War with the Soviet Union. And one of the things that Cernan said, also not on the tape that I did today, that one of the things that was at stake in the 1960s when the Apollo program got launched was, who are the lesser nations on the earth going to align themselves with and follow? Are they going to follow the Soviet Union? Or are they going to follow the United States? Are they going to follow the totalitarian model or the freedom model? And we could not, Kennedy believed, and I agree with him, we could not be perceived as the weaker horse. And here, Gagarin, on their first launch, they had better rockets than we did. Our rockets were terrible. Gagarin, the first launch wasn't a 150-mile lob down range. It was a full orbit of the Earth. They got a man into orbit, and it freaked the aviation, the defense community, the science community, the political community. It freaked the country out that the Soviets could do that and we couldn't. And they were a nuclear opponent. And that's what propelled the manned space program. And Kennedy took his entire stack of chips and shoved them to the center of the table and said, I'm all in. And the country followed him. And you know, there is some evidence to suggest that had he not been assassinated and had Lyndon Johnson, A, not believed in it, and B, not seen a way to bring a whole lot of money to Texas, if he hadn't gotten behind it, we would have lost interest. And it might not have happened. But Kennedy's assassination, the kind of a national pride, we're going to fulfill the commitment that he made. It helped. And Lyndon Johnson, the Manned Spacecraft Center is not in Houston by accident. Lyndon Johnson from Texas made sure it was there. Yes, sir.
What do you think the Artemis program added to our impulse to go forward?
Apollo or Artemis? Well, Artemis is brand new.
What do you think that you know what that adds?
Well, I don't think we want to fall in line behind the Chinese, who are now have a space station they're finishing. They have human launch capacity, and they've stated the desire to go to the moon, and to set up a habitat on the moon and to live there as a means toward further using that as a jumping off place. It takes a lot less thrust to get what you need from the moon to Mars than it does from the Earth to Mars. So you take in stages a little bit, several trips to Mars, assemble it, to the moon, assemble it, and then go to Mars. Do you want the Chinese to do that and us not? I don't. And I know it costs a lot of money, and I know we have a lot of other priorities, and I know that and we're $32 trillion in debt. We got all these problems, but I still don't want to become second in any technological or geopolitical endeavor to any other nation on earth. I don't. Yes, sir.
How did they do the lunar module? How did they get that? Did they put that on the little, how was that?
The lunar module, if you look at, I wish I had pictures. If you look, the lunar module was at the top of the stack below the command and service module, shrouded in kind of a garage was the lunar module. You launch, you detach from the third stage, turn around, go and pull the lunar module out of the garage. It's attached to the front end of the command module, and you fly it to the moon. And then the genius of the Apollo program was when you threw with something, you threw it away. Because the original idea was we'll take a rocket to the moon, we'll land it, bring the same rocket, bring it back home. That's not how we did it. We did it in modules, and we threw things away as we no longer needed them. So the only thing that came back was the crew compartment of the command and service module. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so the lunar module itself was, I said the lunar rover, I guess is what I was.
Lunar rover was contained in the descent stage of the lunar module. There was a stowage compartment, and it was actually folded. It actually folded. They pulled it up, snap it up, and power it up, and it worked.
Okay.
Neat piece of gear.
We're out of time.
We have 2 minutes. That's it.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
More than awesome. Paul, we have a certificate for you. We've made a small contribution to the Literacy Council in your name.
Thank you.
Excellent program, superior in all ways.
Thank you.
Time for Ace of Diamonds.
Thank you.
Allison,
Yes.
I wanted to remind everyone that next week, our meeting before Christmas is induction of our new members. And I would hope that all of us would return and be there for that as well. Next Thursday is very special to induct our new members. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. What is our kitty for today?
Not much. $309.
Oh, did someone win? Let's have Paul pick the winning ticket.
21.
He's back here to one.
Yeah.
Chris Kirk from Australia,
It is.
who's now gonna be on,
It is
it was Brooks.
649.
649. Who's got that ticket? All right, you get the chance to pick the winning card.
Don't lose your glasses. You're gonna be able to look at it.
10 of hearts. Okay, better luck next week. Let us stand for the four-way test of the things we think, speak, and do. Number one, first.
Is it the truth?
Second.
Is it fair to all concerned?
Third.
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Fourth.
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
We are adjourned.